Hi everyone. So I'd just like to start this session by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands our city campus now stands. I'd also like to pay respect to elders both past and present, acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also just like to note that this session will be recorded. If you don't want to participate, you can turn your video off. The recording will be available at a later date. And I just wanted to also run through a quick checklist, or was it an etiquette? So just if you are going to speak over the microphone, just make sure you're well lit. And then make sure you mute yourself if you're not talking. Remember, on campus or online, the UTS values and code of conduct are the same. Be yourself and respectful of others. You can ask questions in the chat, and then you can use the reactions to engage. But now I'll hand over to Emma, ActivateUTS's resident expert in food prep. So take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma. As Emily just said, I work at ActivateUTS. I am 23 years old, and just a few things about me. Can everyone hear me okay, first of all? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to assume that. Okay, awesome. So a few things about me. I used to be pretty sporty when I was younger. I used to be a squad swimmer where I'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning to train, which was awful. I also have a black belt in Taekwondo, which I got when I was about 13. Don't really know if I deserved it because I wasn't actually that good, but I have it and I'm going to keep it. I also used to do basketball, netball. I did dance for about 8 years, that kind of thing. And I did dabble in gymnastics very briefly, but my mum saw me on the balancing beam and she immediately was like, this is not for you, Emma, because I'm not very graceful. So yeah, so right now I go to the gym pretty regularly and I do Zumba twice a week because it's like my fun form of cardio. And I've been meal prepping since I was at uni. I used to go to UTS as well as a student. And my meal prep back then used to be pretty bland. It used to be rice, tuna, and broccoli, and that was pretty much it. And I mean, it did the job, but it wasn't that interesting. So since I started working full time at ActivateUTS, meal prepping has been very, very important. And there are a few reasons why I meal prep now. The number one reason why I meal prep is because I'm lazy. And it's really convenient for me to just grab something out the fridge because ain't nobody got time to cook healthy food every day. And yeah, it's just the most convenient way for me to get a quick and healthy lunch. Another reason is I already go out after work a lot and spend my money at restaurants and pubs and things. So I don't really want to be spending money on lunch every day as well. And I don't know how some of my work colleagues do it. I know that some of you are here, so I see you. I don't know how you spend money on lunch every day as well. So yeah, it's kind of a money saving thing for me. I also make sure that I get my 3 to 4 serves of veg a day in my lunch. So it's just an easy way for me to hit that as well. And it ultimately saves me time. So if I spend 1 to 2 hours cooking on Sunday or Monday night, it saves me from doing that each day of the week. So it's time saving as well. Just a disclaimer, I'm not a nutritionist, a dietitian, anything like that. And I also am I'm hungry constantly. So my meal portion sizes are quite big. So don't be alarmed at when I start talking about the quantities that I use. Everyone's different. So just really keep in mind when you meal prep, what you want your portion sizes to be. I'm also actually not going to be cooking in front of you today just because it takes too long and you'll see how badly I chop up onions. I basically just hack at them and I have no technique and it's kind of embarrassing. So yeah, I'm not going to cook today, but I will kind of show you what I use and recipes that I do. Yeah, so before I get into some actual meal prep recipe ideas, there are a few do's and don'ts of meal prepping that I stick to. It seems obvious, but the first thing that I do, or the first thing that I did when I started meal prepping was I bought some really good containers. I was also lucky enough to have a mum that went and bought loads of Tupperware at primary school. So I have like got a lot of containers that I can switch between, but it's really worth investing in some sturdy containers, preferably that are microwave safe and BPA free, and you want it to be airtight because you don't want anything to get in there, especially if you're keeping food for 4 to 5 days. Yeah, so just invest in some good sturdy containers. Also, when you do meal prep, do mix it up. I model my meal prep generally off a third protein, a third carbs, and a third veggies. But if you keep cooking chicken, rice, and broccoli every week, you will get so bored of it and lunch will become really sad. So I do not recommend just doing the same thing each week because it's easy. Just mix it up. I also do recommend that you cook things to freeze, like bolognese, curries, stew, chili, soup, things like that. You might thank yourself one Sunday night when you really can't be bothered to cook and you can just get it out the freezer and portion it off. Just be aware that if you are freezing things, that liquid does expand in the freezer. So just make sure you have a little bit of room in each of your containers when you freeze it. Do also make sure you allocate a time of the week to do it. I find it really helps me when I put it into my routine. So I make sure that I set aside 1 to 2 hours on a Sunday or a Monday night to meal prep. And that's all that time frame is for me. I'm much less likely to do it if I'm just like, oh yeah, I'll do it later. And then I just never do it. So yeah, make sure you allocate some time. Also, when you meal prep, make sure you start off with a clean kitchen and you prepare everything before you start cooking, because it's very stressful when you're in the middle of cooking and you realize you haven't cut up all your veggies yet and you're trying to like chuck things in and cook it all at once and chop things at the same time. It can get very stressful. So yeah, I recommend getting everything ready and then you can just throw things in as you cook. And also make it fun when you meal prep. So put on your favorite Spotify playlist. I obviously put on my own Spotify playlist that I made because obviously I think that's the best. Or listen to a podcast. Hamish and Andy podcast is a really good one to listen to while you meal prep. Because it can get a little bit tedious and it's good to take your mind off it. A few things to not do when you meal prep. So do not think that a cucumber, lettuce, tomato salad is going to sustain you for lunch, because it won't. You will just get hungry and eat something half an hour later. So make sure that you always have your carbs and protein in there. There's also some really good salad bowls out there. If you are into salad, you can get some really good salad bowls that do have that extra substance. But yeah, just make sure when you meal prep, you are making sure that you'll be full after you eat. This is a personal thing, but I personally cannot stand the thought of meal prepping fish or seafood. Everyone's different, but for me, I know that fish already cooks really quickly, and the thought of reheating it 4 days later in an office microwave does not thrill me. So as a personal choice, I avoid meal prepping fish. But you know, I always have frozen salmon fillets in the freezer because they do make a really quick, easy dinner if I want to. But yeah, I just tend to avoid reheating that because it doesn't taste as good. Also, this is a personal thing. I do not make more than 4 meals at a time. If I meal prep on a Sunday, I do not really want to be eating a questionable meal on Friday. Even Thursday can be a bit sketchy and a bit dodgy. So on Fridays, when I've run out of my meal prep, I tend to do a quick meal prep, which sometimes, for example, might be some fresh rocket, some chickpeas, and some tuna. And that's just really easy to make. And yeah, it's a quick, healthy lunch. Another thing to not do is do not start meal prepping all of your meals straight away. I don't meal prep all of my meals either, because I like to have some variation in my day. But if you start meal prepping all at once, it can like overwhelm you a bit. So I would recommend starting off with breakfast or lunch or something. Some pantry staples. So I recommend when you start meal prepping that you always, you kind of make a list, like even if it's a mental list, about essentials that you use all the time and that you stock up on whenever they run out. So for me, my first, I don't even know where I put it. There it is. So this, I don't know if you can see this properly, but this is lemon pepper seasoning. This goes really well with chicken. I don't know why it tastes so good, but it does. And this is my favorite chicken seasoning. I use about half a packet to marinate 4 chicken breasts. So a little bit goes a long way. so I eat a chicken breast a day with my meal prep. But yeah, so that's one of my staples. Chipotle is another sauce seasoning that I always make sure I have. I've actually started marinating some of my mince already in this Chipotle, so it's open. But this I haven't found it in Woolworths yet, but in Coles they've got it in the Mexican section, and it's really yum for like a good flavor hit. I'm pretty sure you could chuck it on anything and it make it taste good. I also have, I don't know where I put it. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I also keep these in the fridge. They're flavored tofu, basically. Really good option for vegetarians, or I'm not vegetarian, but sometimes I really would like to have a tofu stir fry or something. And these are just really quick and easy because they're already like marinated and I don't have to do anything. So yeah, I just cut them up into strips, and really easy. Another thing that I have recently added to my repertoire is these garlic granules. Obviously it doesn't taste as good as real garlic, but I cannot, for some reason, like chopping garlic really annoys me. So I don't like to do fresh garlic all the time, because it just takes too long and I have to peel it and then my hands smell like garlic. Anyway, this is a really quick, easy alternative, and I just chuck it on pretty much everything. Tins of legumes, so lentils, always really good to have in the pantry. I also have dried chickpeas that I keep in the pantry as well, or you can get tin chickpeas, and things like black beans I always keep in the pantry. It's just really easy to have them as a staple there. Another thing that I have in the pantry all the time is it's this, I don't know if you can, yeah, there we go. It's called protein pasta. It doesn't actually taste terrible. A lot of pasta alternatives taste really bad, but this is really good. It's got nearly 25 grams of protein per serve, which for me is ideal because I have like a certain protein goal that I want to hit. So yeah, I also make sure that I always keep tins of tuna in the drawers because it's a really quick, easy form of protein for me. I always make sure I've got sweet potatoes, and I always make sure I've got sauces on hand. So I really like this teriyaki sauce, really good for chicken and tofu and things like that. This is also kind of a well hidden secret. I don't actually know if it is. I think it is because I only just discovered it. But this is called explosive mixture. It sounds a little bit dangerous, but it is really good for packing some heat and some flavor into your meal prep. Just chuck it on top. It's really good. I've only managed to find it in a select few Coles in the Italian section. So another really good bit of flavor for your meal prep. And I always make sure that I have frozen peas in the freezer as a last resort in case my fresh veggies, like, I don't know, if they go off or I want to do a quick meal prep or something. Frozen peas is kind of the last resort. Yeah, so now for some actual examples of my meal prep and what I do. So the first category that I thought I'd go through today is gym nut. So today, as I mentioned, I'm already have some mince marinating with my chipotle, and I'm going to make some Guzman Bowl inspired burrito bowls. I usually make it with chicken, but I'm sick of chicken at the minute, so I'm actually using beef. But you can also use things like beef chunks, turkey mince, chicken mince, plant-based protein, whatever you want. I use the whole tin to marinate this mince here. And I do it at the very start of my meal prep, so it has time to like marinate and get flavor. Yeah, so the reason, I guess, how I got the idea is I love Guzman Bowl and I love their burrito bowls and Mexican food and burritos and all that kind of stuff. And I realized it's actually really easy for me to make. I was looking at it while I was eating it and I was like, I can actually do all of this at home. Why am I paying money, like this much money for one meal? Yeah, so while my mince is marinating, you can do it overnight if you want, but I can't be bothered to do that, so I just do it at the start of my meal prep. I then move on to making the fresh salsa at Guzman, which is so good. But yeah, I found a really simple recipe, and essentially it's tomatoes. I use these ones because I just like the taste of them more, so I use them. I chop them up. I put in the juice of 1 lime, or lime to taste, however much lime you want. I chop up a red onion, and this is why I'm not cooking today, so you wouldn't have to see me hack this up. What else do I use? My garlic granules. You can obviously use fresh garlic, it'll taste better. And the controversial ingredient, which is coriander. I use half a bunch of coriander when I make my salsa. I know that not everyone likes coriander, but I think it goes really well with Mexican food and I love it. So yeah, and if you don't like it, then you can always replace it with something like parsley or some other herb that you like. But yeah, I basically put those 5 ingredients in a bowl and I chop it up and I mix it and that's it. And it's really easy to just keep in an airtight container in the fridge. Yeah, so after I've done my salsa, I will prepare my veggies. I usually do steamed broccoli or sauteed kale or raw spinach with this. I'm trying to eat more raw vegetables because I'm really bad at eating raw vegetables. So yeah, like whatever green I can put in there. I know that Guzman Bowls don't actually have the green in there usually, but trying to make it a little bit more healthy. Yeah, so after I've done the salsa and I prepared my veggies, I then saute the mince in a pan. I don't want to overcook it because it gets reheated and overcooked mince is not very nice. But once the mince is cooked and that's done, I put the mince, the cooked veggies and half a tin of these black beans into a container. And then I take the salsa to work in a little airtight container. And if I want to add some rice in, maybe I'm doing a workout or something later that day and I want some extra like carbs, I'll add some rice in and then that's pretty much it. You can also add some guacamole if you want to for some healthy fats. I actually cannot stand avocado, so I do not. I know, which is really controversial. People are always like, what? But I just don't think it's that nice. But yeah, that's another really good thing to add in there if you want to make it a bit more filling and yeah, have something else in there. But yeah, so my Guzman Bowl at the minute is my go-to. And it's really easy. It's just meat, rice and beans, salsa, and some veggies. Yeah. Another meal that I tend to make a lot is kind of a more interesting version of chicken, rice and veggies, which is like the typical gym meal. So I'll make it a bit more interesting by marinating my chicken in like this teriyaki sauce or the lemon pepper seasoning that I showed you before. For my carbs, I might do some quinoa in some chicken stock, which is the key to making quinoa taste good, by the way, is you cook it in either chicken stock, veggie stock, beef stock, whatever. And yeah, or if I don't want quinoa that day, I'll do roast sweet potato, sorry, which is also one of my go-to favorite all-time, like best ever. And then I'll do whatever veggies I want that week. So it might be zucchini, broccolini, kale sauteed in lemon, or at least 3 different vegetables, preferably green ones because, you know, they're good for you. A tip, if you do, my colleagues are going to laugh so much at me at this because they pay me out for doing this all the time. But if you do use kale, I recommend you, like, this sounds really weird and no one think I'm bizarre for this, but like massaging it and rubbing it a little bit because kale is really tough. And if you like sort of break down the cellulose walls a little bit, it becomes a lot softer and I think it tastes better. So yeah, look, tip, if you want to try it. I think it's worth doing and I'll always do it before I meal prep. And I just usually saute that in a pan with some olive oil and lemon because I really don't like the taste of raw kale. But yeah, so I just kind of tend to do a variation of chicken, rice and veggies because it's usually really boring and I want to make it interesting. Vegetarian food. So my favorite vegetarian meal prep is a stir fry. I usually use that this tofu and I just cut it into strips. And stir fry is a really important meal to prepare everything before you actually cook it. So I will shred about 3 carrots, 2 capsicum. I'll chuck in a packet of snow peas and I'll chop up 2 bunches of broccolini. Basically, I will cook the veggies on a high heat in a wok for about 3 minutes and then I'll add the tofu because the tofu doesn't need to actually cook. It just needs to kind of heat up. And then, yeah, the key is to not let your veggies cook for too long either because they go soft and then you pretty much, the more you cook it, the less nutrients there are in your veggies. So I kind of like them a bit crunchy as well. So yeah, just don't overcook it. And the great thing about a stir fry is you can chuck in pretty much anything that you want and it's done and it's easy. It can also be done with meat if you don't like tofu or if you're not a vegetarian. I usually put in the meat very thinly sliced at the very beginning with all the vegetables, and then it sort of cooks all at the same time. And yeah, I'll usually use teriyaki sauce for that, or if it's already pre-marinated tofu, I'll try and veer in the same flavors as what that is, so it's not like this weird combination of different flavors. But yeah, life hack for me, when you do a stir fry, is I use peanut butter as a sauce. I know that sounds kind of weird, but crunchy peanut butter like on top it's great. Obviously, if you want to make it more into a real satay sauce, you can do it by adding coconut milk, sweet chili, spices, that kind of thing. But I'm all about that quick and easy, do it as quickly as possible approach. So yeah, peanut butter, try it. Nourish Balls are also a really simple vegetarian meal to make. What I like to do to make, I guess, the base of it is I like to roast some chickpeas in the oven with some olive oil and paprika so they become really crunchy. And then I'll add in some sweet potato that's also been roasted, some green veggies, maybe a slaw if I'm bothered to make a slaw, which most of the time I'm not, but sometimes I'm feeling it. And then you just put it in a bowl, and that's pretty much it. Like, there are so many recipes online for Nourish Bowls, as they're usually called, or salad bowls or things like that. But I find that a really good dressing to go on top of that, especially if you've got chickpeas and sweet potato in there, is tahini dressing. And there are lots of recipes again online for tahini dressing, but it's basically like, it's usually just tahini, lemon juice, and garlic, and a little bit of sweetener like honey or agave or something. And yeah, just put it on top, and that's done. So there are loads of, you can pretty much make, I think, any meal prep vegetarian if you wanted to. One of my favorite vegetarian meal preps, though, which kind of slides into the budget-friendly meal prep, is protein pasta with lentil bolognese. So obviously you don't have to use this protein pasta that I showed you before. You can use any type of pasta. But yeah, it just helps me hit my protein goals. So I use that. And again, so many lentil bolognese recipes online. And the great thing about bolognese, I think, is that it's so versatile. Like, everyone's bolognese recipe is different. So you can chuck in pretty much whatever you want to in there. My tip would be is to cram as many veggies in there as humanly possible. So I will grate zucchini, I will grate carrot, I will chop up mushrooms really finely because I don't like mushrooms that much. And I'll put it all in there, and it tastes really good. Even at the end, sometimes I'll put in some fresh spinach at the very end after I've turned the heat off, and the spinach will just naturally wilt because it's obviously going to wilt from the residual heat. And yeah, and it's just a really easy way, a really good meat alternative to normal meat bolognese, and it's a great way to get in lots of veggies in there as well. And yeah, I guess segueing into budget meal prepping, that can be done really easily on a budget because pasta is really cheap, lentils are really cheap, tinned tomatoes are very cheap, and then you can chuck in like onion, like I said, carrot, zucchini, eggplant. I even put eggplant in there one time, and it tasted pretty good. So I would recommend just experimenting with what you like to do. And yeah, and it's really good to freeze as well, that bolognese. So yeah, lentil bolognese, definitely a good option if you haven't tried it before. The key to budget meal prepping generally is you need to use cheap carbs like chickpeas, lentils, beans, rice, pasta, that kind of thing. Find the cheapest cut of protein that you can. So chicken thighs, for example, are generally cheaper than chicken breast. Or tofu obviously is cheaper than meat, or other meat alternatives. Maybe see what's on special that week. And also using whatever veggies are on special. And I think just as long as you marinate it with a nice sauce, like teriyaki or soy or explosive mixture, whatever it is, you can make it work. So yeah, I think just make sure you've got those key budget staples in mind, and you can work with what you've got. So yeah, that's kind of my budget meal prep ideas. I always fall back when I'm going a little bit broke that fortnight is I always have my fallback of tuna, rice, and broccoli. Even though it's not the most interesting, I can jazz it up with sauce. Pesto chickpeas. I don't know why, but pesto and chickpeas I really like as a combination. And then I'll do some chicken with Italian herbs and whatever veggies I want to use as well. Wraps with veggies as well can also be a really good cheap alternative for meal prepping, and obviously is pretty easy to prepare. So yeah, just experiment with it, see what you can do. And I've also added in, kind of just off the cuff here, a lazy meal prep option or a beginner meal prep option. So if you don't really know where to start, I know that I feel like I've just been talking forever and fast, so I'm sorry, please feel free to ask me anything once I'm done. But if you're just starting off and it's a bit overwhelming, the easiest meal prep you can do without fail is a sheet pan recipe. This is literally where you chuck your veggies and meat in a bowl. You season it with garlic, soy sauce, and sriracha is a really good combination, I think, for this. And then you literally just season it together in a bowl, chuck it on a tray, and you cook it in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes. But it depends on your oven. Everyone's ovens cook differently for different times. So it might take a bit of trial and error. But yeah, some great roasting veggies for this are things like eggplant, zucchini, cauliflower, sweet potato, regular potato, carrots, broccoli, the list goes on. I usually do sheet pan recipes with chicken, but I can find that chicken dries out really quickly. So what I do is I put some baking paper over the chicken when it's in the oven, so it retains that moisture, and I seal it in. And yeah, it keeps it moist and nice, and doesn't dry out, because dried chicken is the worst. And I also like my roast veggies fairly soft. There's nothing worse to me than biting into a sweet potato and it's a bit hard. Like, that's just upsetting. So I always chop up my veggies fairly small so they cook evenly with the chicken. The thing about baking the chicken in the baking paper is it doesn't really crisp up that much. So if you do want to crisp it up, take it out of the oven after it's finished cooking, put it in a really hot pan with some sesame oil to crisp it up. Don't do it for too long because you don't want to overcook the inside. You just want to crisp up the outside. Yeah, so they're my main lunch go-to meal preps. I do have some other meal prep options. For example, for breakfast, overnight oats is an option, and it's cheap. Oats are really cheap if you buy them in bulk. I'm personally not as much of a fan of overnight oats though, just because I prefer hot porridge, not cold porridge, I guess. But you can also do that with chia puddings, and it's pretty much the same thing, but you substitute the oats for chia seeds. You can do sweet or savory muffins, you can do breakfast bars, you can do smoothie packs where you like pre-make your smoothies without blending it, and then you can just chuck it in your blender in the morning. Or you can even make your own granola, which I find is so much better than store-bought granola, because you can, one, choose what you put in it, and two, you can toast it and it's fresh and it's delicious, and I just think it's far superior. And some snacks as well. You can also do things like protein balls, energy bars that you make yourself with like sunflower seeds, pepitas, nuts, sultanas, things like that. You can also do crispy chickpeas as a snack in the oven, which I think I mentioned it before. Just coating some chickpeas in a bit of olive oil and paprika or whatever seasoning you want, and shoving them in the oven, and they just come out like crispy little, I wouldn't say that chips, but close enough. Yeah, so basically meal prepping will make your life easier if you do not do it already. Just to recap, so today I'm making my Guzman inspired bowls with chipotle flavored protein, fresh salsa, black beans, rice and veggies. I also do more interesting versions of the old chicken, rice and broccoli combination. I still apply the same concepts of meat, protein, carbs, veggies, but I just make it more interesting and to what I'm feeling that day. Experiment with seasonings as well for that. Also, stir fry is really easy. You can pretty much chuck anything in there. Just don't overcook your veggies. A great budget and vegetarian option is this lentil bolognese. But again, you can chuck whatever you want in there. If you want to do a meat bolognese, you can. If you want to chuck in whatever veggies you've got in the fridge, you can. It's pretty flexible. But yeah, I would just say remember to include your protein, carbs, and veggies so you stay full. Play around with your meal prep a bit, so experiment with what you like and just come up with a few staples that you always have in your pantry. I find it helps so much, and yeah, it just gives me a good variation each week, I guess. And yeah, if you're having trouble, I really recommend like investing in some cookbooks or something. Like I get a lot of recipes from this. I'm in no way sponsored or endorsed by this guy. I just think he's got some good recipes. But yeah, it can be good to just get some inspiration from, you know, real life people who do this for a living. And yeah, my last tip would be to just try and get as many veggies in there as you can. And herbs do not count as a vegetable, as, you know, contrary to some of my colleagues' opinions. Herb is not a vegetable. But yeah, I was wondering, like, does anyone have any questions or any staples or meal prep ideas that people want to share? Or has anyone got any comments about anything or want to share a cool recipe that they usually do for their meal prep? No? Cool.
We've had a few people say some stuff in the chat.
Sorry, I literally do not even see the chat. Okay.
No, you're all good. You were talking.
Yeah, okay. Oh, explosive mixture is, oh, see, cool. Someone else has found it too. I didn't even know it existed until a few weeks ago.
There was a question.
Mm-hmm.
What recommendations do you have for dressing/sauces that aren't terrible for you for your salad/veg bowls to keep the flavor?
Dressings?
Yeah.
So I usually go for that tahini dressing because it also has some good fats in it as well, and you can kind of mix it up with what you like in there. There are a lot of like honey soy ginger dressings, which can be good if you make them yourself, and you can sub in like the honey for like an alternative sweetener like agave or something to make it sound to make it taste like better and to sub out some of the sugar. But yeah, I don't tend to make dressings as much. Honestly, I tend to use like sauces. So like teriyaki, soy, a lot of Asian flavors usually. Honey mustard dressing can also be good, but I don't really do that as often because I honestly just can't be bothered a lot of the time. And I stick to kind of what I've got in my pantry, I guess. But yeah, I would just say quickly on that, a lot of the dressings that you find in the shop, like they might be a bit not terrible for you, but they might not be great for you, but I guarantee you can make a healthier version of it yourself at home. So I recommend just like looking up a recipe for it, and even if it's your favorite, Google it and see what you can find, because there will be a healthy way to do it.
Do you have any recommendations for fish or seafood?
For fish, well, like I said at the beginning, I don't really cook seafood for meal prepping because I find because it cooks so quickly, and then when I reheat it, it tastes not as good. But if I were to cook it, I would cook it in a similar way to my chicken. So I would cook it with some baking paper over the top of it, so it kind of retains as much moisture as it can. And yeah, I'd keep it as one big fillet as well. Okay, I'm gonna try and like look at these, look at these.
And then we have another question that says, how do you make sure after a few days you aren't sick of the same meal? Sometimes when I meal prep by day 3, I don't really want it anymore. What can I do to avoid that?
I would say to add some spice into it, like literally add some spice into it to make it more interesting. If you want to add something else into it, to, you know, just keep it going. And that's why I rotate like every week. Like I don't make the same thing for 4 weeks in a row because I'll be so over it. So I can usually cop it for 4 days. But if you're sick of it by day 3, then I would suggest probably mixing up what you're doing with it. because you probably shouldn't really be that sick of it by day 3. But yeah, I understand if you want to switch it up weekly, because it can get really repetitive and boring.
But did anyone else have any other questions?
Well, that's a good recipe for, I'm just looking in the comments for tahini, dissolved miso, garlic oil, and yogurt, and then you thin that with water. That looks really good, and that might also be helpful for the question for the salad bowl dressing question. That looks really yum. I'm going to try that next week. But I currently have a big bowl of mince marinating next to me, so not this week. Cool. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or anything? What is this ajvar? I'm probably saying that so wrong. This seasoning in the comments that's kind of like explosive mixture. Oh, that looks good. I'm going to look into that as well. See, this is great because I'm learning things as well for my meal prep. Cool. Well, if no one else has any comments, I guess that's kind of it. I hope that was helpful and I didn't speak really, really quickly and go through things really, really fast. But yeah, I think this is recorded, so it will be available for you to look at later on.
But thanks everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed the session and enjoy the rest of your week. And hope to see you at the next How to Adult on the 20th, where we talk some more about food items and some kitchen hacks that you might not know if you haven't lived in your into your family and had the fortunate experience of, similar to me, with growing up with your grandmother around and those kind of things.
Cool.
Enjoy your day, guys. Bye.
All right, thank you everyone. Bye.